Well, hello, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Solutionaries here on Regenerative Media TV, now broadcasting on YouTube and Vimeo. So I'm happy to be here today. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Colorado, and I'm really honored to have some time today with our next presenter that we're very happy to kind of give her the opportunity to promote her organization, her work, but also to talk more specifically about the incredible work that she's doing on the ground in Los Angeles post the wildfires that happened just over a year ago. And for me, this is also kind of a important traction moment in the chapter of our Build Back Green LA project, which, of course, when these disasters happen, we first have to clean them up, and then we have to look at how things have been built and designed, and why are we dealing with problems at this level, and try to think about things in a little bit of a different way about how we build and how we can be more green, more sustainable, and avoid some of the catastrophic fallout that happens when these events happen. So today I'm really happy to have Christine Lenches-Hinkle from 301 Organics. I met her recently as we work towards the Soil Summit coming up February 21st and 22nd. The 21st will be a hands-on event in Altadena, where Christine will be there and actually sharing some of her amazing work and technology around soil testing and soil remediation. And then on Sunday, we'll have the virtual event. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome again, Christine Lenches-Hinkle to our show.
Gosh, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you, to have this conversation with you. Yes, and to share about our work. I guess it's a matter of self-introductions then. A little bit about myself. I have been in the environmental field for probably over 25 years now. Started out as an environmental scientist, planner, and um, analyst for probably close to 7, 8 years. Working in the corporate environment. So that's how I started my career. But I do have a master in science, in forestry and international resource conservation. So the tie-in to soils and the work that we are doing now is very relevant to the academic training that I did receive years ago, however, applied to the urban sector. So, excuse me. Um,
And also, if I may, bringing science and statistics to the forefront, because we know, again, which we'll dive into in a little bit, when these incidents happen, of course, a lot of people, they want to get back to their property, to their land, but a lot of people, what they don't understand is the post fire toxicity that happens. So as opposed to speaking from it from just a human perspective or esoteric or these types of perspectives, you really bring the on the ground logistics, which is so important because we live in an age where there's a lot of perceptions, and of course some people believe in science, and this is really important because it directly affects community health.
yeah, in every way, shape, and form. What I have found with our success on the ground, has been being able to work in the private sector, servicing clients who are in a position to be able to afford our consulting science services, applying that science on the ground and being able to collect that data, not necessarily for academic purposes, but for client services, to prove that the recommendations that we are advising on and putting forth and then implementing and following through on, that it's actually working. We can show a trajectory, we can show results that we're heading in the right direction in terms of our objective, which is to improve the health of the soil. Um, as a small business, and also being a native to Pasadena and Altadena, born and raised, I have over 50 plus years of familiarity with the community, with the political infrastructure, with the small business infrastructure, with the nonprofit sectors that are operating on the ground. So it made so much sense for us to pivot from the regulatory compliance work that we were doing in organics management. So food waste recovery, food waste recycling, composting, landfill diversion of all that material, and going straight into providing the services, soil services to the fire survivors in Altadena.
Right, and this is a good point because I want to get a little bit of the story of how you got interested in this field, and I know you were involved for years. Of course, everybody knows the Rose Bowl,
Yeah.
but before we dig into the fire, how did you get involved in this field, and can you share with us some of the work you do that's not necessarily related to post-disaster work around? Because I know
Right.
your theme is like going beyond testing, which is great because you don't just do testing, you
Right.
actually bring the solution. So you're
Right.
kind of a
Right. Right.
full spectrum solutionary. But how did you get
Yeah,
involved?
exactly. So, I'll go back to the whole Rose Bowl affiliation because there our tagline was going beyond recycling.
Hmm.
And this was back in 2016. So prior to 2016, I had stepped out of the corporate world back in 2008, 2009, and because I saw a huge gap in analysis, right? I was responsible for doing a lot of CEQA, NEPA compliance work. So gathering data in the field from anywhere from noise data to water data to traffic data to doing wetland delineations, doing monitoring of construction sites
Wow.
for the refurbishment of major golf courses in the city of LA, the county of LA. So with that, stepping out of corporate, seeing a gap in the organics resource side of things, particularly in the solid waste industry, that organics was being lumped into this bigger broad category of trash. And only trash haulers were allowed to manage it, handle it, document it, dispose of it. And yet, from an environmental science standpoint, and being a composting advocate at the time, I was
Mm.
very into zero waste. I was raising my kids. I wanted to demonstrate, being mindful of the resources that you buy and use and how what the life cycle is. So composting was a great demonstration for that. But stepping out of corporate and wanting to really focus on the organic side of things because of the intel that I was exposed to, just
Right.
what our infrastructure looked like on the back end in terms of how are we managing our organics? Well, it's going all to landfill. And that was a huge
Wow.
problem in our analysis for these EIRs, the environmental impact reports that we were writing, but never truly seeing the clarity in the analysis that
Mm.
the problem really laid with how we were managing organics, right? And who was
Right.
accessing and had access to it, right? So that kind of led me down the rabbit hole, obviously, of soils, right? Because how do you build healthy soil? Well, it's through composting. That's a process and it's an end result, right? You get a finished product of compost. But me as an academic, not at the PhD level, but I'm a searcher. I'm constantly asking questions. I'm constantly trying to make connections and solve problems, right? From a systems level approach, which was my professional background and training as an environmental planner. We had to look at and analyze 16 different issue areas, right?
Wow.
From air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, utilities, public services, recreation, you name it, even soils and geology. That's when I started, asking. very specific questions like, well, wait, the bigger problem is we are sending our organics to landfills and it it has value. It is not trash.
Yeah, and it's amazing too, excuse me, because I know more and more people are waking up to the importance of what they call, as a permaculture designer myself, we understood the importance of the soil, the biome of the soil and soil
Right.
health related to the success of agriculture. And of course, in the industrial monocropping model, it's just
Right.
like more pesticides, more herbicides, more
Exactly.
chemicals, more fertilizers. But what's been great is right now there's been this whole kind of resurgence and awakening to the importance of regenerative agriculture. What does that mean?
Right.
And like you said, working with things like compost and other methodologies that are much more holistic. And then when you overlay that on the fact of how we look at trash in our culture
Yeah.
and the idea of recycling, which has really changed, and of course more awareness about microplastics and forever chemicals and all these things that are
Yes.
contaminating soil and landfills and get into the groundwater. It's really a serious issue, and it's something we're going to touch on at the end about how everyone needs to take a individual responsibility about us as consumers, what we buy, what we
Yeah.
bring into our home, what we use for land management, household cleaners, cosmetics. All of these things really have
Right.
a profound impact. So amazing work
Absolutely.
you were doing
Yeah.
at the Rose Bowl.
So that's where, when, I mean, we were doing some institutional work for universities who really caught on to the new law, the SB 1383 and AB 1826, which was recycling and organics recycling and diversion. So we had a lot of planning and experience regarding organics management, and we were fortunate enough to get in front of the powers that be at the Rose Bowl that they had no idea about this law. And immediately they picked us up and said, well, then you're responsible for our compliance and managing our food scraps, our food waste, because we've got literally tons
Wow.
of food waste that needs to be recovered, diverted, tracked, reported on.
Right.
And I went beyond recycling there to say, look, this is not about recycling. This is recycling of the plastics and the aluminum will take care of itself once we start planning initially for organics recycling, right? And the composting side. Now, when I went down the rabbit hole after leaving corporate, it really was digging down into what was the magic ingredient that makes composting work, right? What was the science behind composting? And it led me to the Soil Food Web School. It led me to the regenerative agricultural sector, right? Because soils really are soils, right? Across the board, whether you're talking growing cash crops in soil or whether you're growing ornamentals in the
Right.
urban sector in soil. The magic is in the soil biology, right? The microbes. Just like we have a gut microbiome that is diverse, and the more diverse it is, the better you are in terms of your health and resiliency, and your immune system is stronger. It's very similar in the ground. There's a soil microbiome, a gut in the ground that needs to be fed and watered wherever you're at, whether you're a farmer or a landscaper or a homeowner that's maintaining your lawn or your native garden. If you're not understanding how that plant is being supported underground and all the worker bees and the soldiers underground, they need to be taken care of. You're not taking care of the plant. The plant will take care of itself once it's established in its home that is supported by all the staff.
And I love that you're bringing this up. A lot of work that we do with Earthstock Enterprises, people think that the environment and ecology is something outside of ourselves. Like, I'm going to go walk in nature and look at the environment. And they miss the connection between the external ecology and human beings' relationship to that. And like you said, perfectly connecting our digestive gut biome to the biome of soil and
Yeah.
the interconnection and the kind of symbiotic nature of people's health and the health of the food we eat, the health of the soil, and this important connection. And we're at such this what I call the regenaissance right now, because
Oh, that's great.
we've known about sustainability, we've known about recycling, we've had all these different words and approaches, but right now, like this whole idea of regenerative solutions is so important, and
Right.
it takes a lot of kind of letting the old paradigm take its last gasp and be compost for what the new solutions and the new technology, which a lot of it, as you just said, is not new. This is biomimicry. This is really
Yeah,
nature's
it's old, it's
intelligence.
ancient. Yeah. We've just
So,
we've just evolved on the science side to be able to document it. We now know what questions to ask. We know what metrics to measure for, collect, synthesize, manage, analyze, and then report on. So that was the biggest challenge we had at the Rose Bowl Stadium, right? They were driven by a need to comply, right? Or else the hammer was going to come down and all sorts of fines, what have you, which never
right.
happened. But still, there was a fear factor of, well, we've got to do something, and we're the biggest institution in Pasadena, and we're the biggest food waste generator, right? They're also the largest green waste generator because they also, part of the purview of the campus that we were responsible for helping set up an organics recovery program was the golf course, 192 acres worth
Wow.
of grass to manage and tree canopy and vegetation to manage. But then you have um, the soccer fields out in front of the stadium. You had the football field inside the stadium, all living cover. So if we just want to broadly characterize the plants, whether it's grass or trees, shade trees, or the rose garden and landscaping on the concourse, let's just call it living cover, right? In a
And,
diversity.
and I will say, this is such a huge rabbit hole. I work with a few organizations on non-toxic communities. I've worked with Zen Honeycutt Moms Across America. And there's also a group Beyond Toxics. Also, my friend Tora
Yes,
Rocha used to manage the gardens in Oakland.
right,
But there's a whole thing about the important role of
right.
pollinators and the whole interrelationship of an ecosystem. So, I mean, I could spend
Yeah.
hours
Oh
talking
yeah.
with you, I know.
There's a
But
lot there to unpack.
yeah, but the thing that's amazing before we pivot to the work that you're doing post fire and the
Hmm.
event coming up is that what we learned is the largest agricultural product in the United States is actually grass.
Grass.
And if we think about the golf
Yeah.
courses, the parks, the sports
Yep.
stadiums, you go on, and then you think about how they're managed, the products that are being used, and the
Exactly.
potential lack of them really being
Exactly.
using green, sustainable
Yeah.
methods. So I love that you mentioned
Yeah.
that.
So
This is a
I'd
real.
love to expand on it too, because it is the origins of the services that we're providing to Altadena. What we did at the Rose Bowl Stadium over 8 years was not only set them up for collecting the very raw material that's needed for composting, but we were recovering the biology at the same time. Then we were processing all of that material on site, so avoiding the hauling, avoiding the emissions, avoiding the landfill emissions that wherever it was going to be dumped, and putting it to highest and best use on site. The next step was convincing management, not just the operations, the COO officer, that this was a financially viable, cost-effective protocol, standard operating procedure, to start pivoting away from using chemical fertilizers on the golf course and on the field, on the concourse landscaping, and on the soccer fields. So, with that pitch, because this was after probably 4 years where we started saying, okay, now that we have our processes down for collection, prior we were still sending it out for offsite composting. But still, there's an impact on transportation and emissions. And the ultimate goal was to reduce that carbon footprint and get the materials processed on site, which we did probably in year 5. We started bringing in the latest and greatest composting and food waste processing technologies to test to see if it would measure up to the standards and biological diversity that we were making in the compost on site. So we were really crossing over into the technology world in the composting industry and testing the waters to see if these manufacturers were whatever their claims were for being able to process food waste into compost in 24 hours or 72 hours. We'll put it to the test and we'll compare it biologically with the compost we were making, right? So it was a huge insight and intel that sadly only stayed with the Rose Bowl because they were our clients, right? But the outcome of all of that work was we were able to partner with the premier of premier trailblazers in this industry, which was Dr. Elaine Ingham at the Soil Food Web School, who had been building out a program and curriculum to teach people about regenerative practices, but more
Right.
so about what is the soil food web and the principles behind it. In academia, they use the term soil biodiversity, one and the same. I mean, I'm tracking both sides, right? But I chose during COVID when everything shut down, we were still kept on, in a limited capacity because the grass still grew on the golf
Right.
course. The trees still shed their leaves. The rose bushes still needed to be cut back. And so we were kept on. We continued to make compost. And from the finished product, we partnered with the Soil Food Web School folks and Dr. Elaine Ingham to say, okay, next step, what do we do now? We take the compost and we do trials. We want to prove to the the turf manager who's in charge of the world-renowned football field, the turf grass inside, that if we used this compost in the form of a biological application, that we would do no harm to the grass, right? And so that's where it all started, was we wanted to demonstrate that using a biological input, right, that it could either perform just as well as an inorganic fertilizer or better. And so we had to come up with the metrics, right? And we did, and we have documented that, and I've done webinars on that, just sharing those results. And it was very promising. Then we moved to the golf course. Similar results using a biological approach. So adding biology from the compost. Yes, you can add compost straight, but in order to scale, because that was the biggest question, how do you scale this across
Right.
192 acres, right? And the same question today is asked, how do you scale biological treatments that we're doing in Altadena across 13,000 homes,
Wow.
properties, not homes, but properties? Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. So there's confidence in the work that we did at the Rose Bowl Stadium because if it was good enough for the Rose Bowl Stadium, we know how to make compost. And now we're making compost in Altadena from the very local resources that are once being thrown away. Now we're recovering it and we're redirecting it inward so that we can capitalize on the biology and the diversity that's in that material to make this really high quality product that's locally made by a local workforce and treating the local survivors with it. So
Wow.
it's a really it's a bigger vision than expected, but the fact that we're not making it up, we didn't have to start from scratch. We knew what we were doing. It was a very easy pivot for us. All we needed to do was just start
Right.
working.
Well, kudos to you because not only are you at the cutting edge of innovation and the idea of soil regeneration, and as your motto says, going beyond testing, you're going beyond greenwashing, you're going beyond the bureaucracy, and you're partnering actually true full spectrum system development along with these types of regenerative practices. So I'm just taking this all in, and really how full spectrum the work that you've done and what you're doing. So let's transport ourselves to today, post the
Yeah.
fires in Altadena. And I had family in Pasadena, so it's a place I have many fond memories, and we've done a few events in the area. But now you're kind of taking on this whole post-fire soil testing, bringing the statistics to people about what's in the soil, why is it in the soil, but also you're bringing the solution to remediate that. So what does that look like currently right now on the ground for you with
Yeah.
your work?
Well, really, yeah, just to start, we immediately started testing and our treatments back in February of last year. So by February 9th, I think it was, we had collected our first sample. And we knew that we needed to collect baseline, post-fire baseline testing. We needed that snapshot of where are we starting from? We needed data. We needed to look at how much biology still exists. Was all of the microbes killed off, or is it just bacteria, that is there? Bacteria will always be there everywhere, right? We're all biological. It lives on inert materials. And then the second was the treatment, obviously, and we piggybacked off of what the treatments we were doing at the Rose Bowl Stadium that we knew that worked, were effective. And then, of course, 2 to 3 weeks later is when we were advised that's the protocol for the soil food web practice that we were at the Rose Bowl testing to see did the biology take? Was there a tick up in any of the microbes? Even the smallest, even if it was just one microbe, and if there was a difference and a tick up, then we're like, okay, we're on the right path. We would send it out for chemical testing. Was there a dip in any of the chemicals, right? And if there was a dip in both the chemical going downward, slight, but somewhat, and a tick up in biology, then we knew we were on the right track. Then we just needed to maintain the conditions for the microbes to be able to populate. So we treated every property that received these microbes like our babies, right? You have to feed, you have to provide liquid, like moisture, water to keep them alive so that they do the work of decomposition and cycling of nutrients.
And I just want to add too that you're kind of going beyond. I did a dozen or so interviews after the fire, and of course now we're in a situation where FEMA has been basically defunded, and the involvement of federal or local government response has been the best that they could do, or even more so, even possibly anemic or non-existent. And I've talked to several people that still, some places still have debris on
Mhm.
their properties. They haven't removed any of the heavy debris. Some have had that removed, and then some had the basic remediation technique, which was basically scraping the top 6 inches of soil
Yeah.
from the site and then removing that. And I had heard different reports that some of this was just being dumped out in different landfills, potentially out in Calabasas and other areas, which it moves the problem, but
Yeah,
it
exactly.
doesn't remediate it. And then
Exactly.
then of course there's the impact of the wind blowing the burnt material around, the rain, the drainage, the groundwater. So this is it's a very common sense type of uh, awareness when we look at it. But unless we have critical thinking and we look at the interrelations or understand the interconnectedness of natural systems and ecology, it's hard to understand. So
Yeah.
what were some of the things, if you don't mind, when you did this initial testing, what were some of the things that you found in the soil there?
Yeah, well, I could share my screen because I do have in the background a one-page kind of preliminary findings summary, and it has the numbers. It was towards the end of the year. We were able to treat over 50 properties, but at the end of
Wow.
the year, we had only received back 37 test results after treatment, which is beyond the 30 that typically academia requires in order to normalize the results or the trends that you might be seeing. So this flyer, I could share it if I have.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm sure while you're queuing that up, there's things like a lot of the homes probably were older homes with lead paint. Of course, things from household products, cars burning if they were electric cars, lithium batteries, tires. So,
Right.
um, you know, like,
Yeah.
oh,
So can you see this flyer
yes,
here?
yeah.
Okay. This is what will be shared at the Soil Summit. I think I'm going to blow this up and put it on a big poster board. But to kind of talk you through this, um, we generally tell people that we can get measurable results within 3 weeks from treatment. So after treatment, we go in 2 weeks and collect samples, and within a week, another week, we can get the lab results back for the chemical side of things on the profile. Of the 42 sites we've treated, it's been over 50 now, but we have 37 that were tested after treatment. And so, based on this 37 number of properties, when we look at the different metals on the right-hand side, this number here, the 78% of treated sites, is based on 37. So, 78% of the properties treated realized a decline in arsenic, realized a decline in cadmium, realized a decline in chromium, cobalt, and lead. Now, I do also have, and I have run the analysis on the percent change in these analytes, but I chose to present it in this way. And the change is actually very favorable as well. And I don't have them off the top of my head, but I will at the Soil Summit. Um,
Well, we give people something to look forward to and show up.
yeah, yeah. These results are also shared in a report that we prepared for the county. The county public health department was really on us to get them a report so that they could post on their fire dashboard, um, just to communicate to the public what alternatives exist and to give some educational content, to become more familiar with this process, biology. And really, all of our we don't just do chemical testing, right? That's definitely not going to be enough because healthy soil is not about chemistry. It's included, it's a part of it, but we have to look at the biology. And so the training that I received and then now am really advocating to get my team trained in microscopy to be able to identify the beneficial microbes that we want to see in our compost and then transferred into the ground when we do our treatments. It's all using a microscope, right? And there's a methodology. And we have a methodology for applying the materials, both in bulk and in this liquid form. So people can easily get this report if they go to the county fire dashboard. It has kind of an overview. It has the background, um, and then a description. It shares what our methodology was. So if you're curious, if you're a science geek or just want to learn or just intrigued by it, this is a report to kind of, go through. And there is a graph in here. Average percent reduction. So in this report, I do provide that percent reduction amount. So for lead, we were seeing a decrease by 30% in just 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow.
Actually, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You're seeing a 30% reduction. So we're hearing a lot of like skepticism, in the community, and they just kind of flippantly say, "Oh, it doesn't work, it just takes too long, there's too many variables," and they just throw all kinds of cynical questions. And we're fine, throw it at us. That's fine. That's what's important to be able to debunk, over time, right?
Right.
So it was important, to collect results in 2 weeks to be able to show what the trend is. Not that you're going to be safe yet or that you're done yet, but to really introduce this new alternative and option for treating your soils versus having to scrape it, versus having to excavate and haul it off site to create those secondary off-site impacts where you're just displacing the impact like you were talking about.
Right.
So, as for cadmium and chromium, it's all in the, the 30s range, which is really cool to see. Yes, there was an increase in some, that's just, part of the process. That's part of the, the 30 or 40% of properties that didn't respond well. But we have been able to come up with some hypotheses and identify conditions that were not normal to that site and to other sites. So, um, but there's no money to really drill down on that
Well,
kind of science and prove one way or the other.
that's what I'm curious about. So people can hire you as an individual or property owner, and you can come in and bring in the testing and some of the remediation techniques. If you
Yeah.
don't mind me asking, I mean, what is the local government or civic leadership support in helping to get this important, valuable work done, especially since people are really kind of chomping at the bit to be, get back on their land, even if it's just putting a mobile home there, getting
Yeah.
back on their property, being able to inhabit it,
Yeah.
being potentially exposed to these contaminants, which is something I really want to emphasize because we saw a
Yeah.
lot of that after the Paradise Fire. And then now, years later, I think it's been, what, 8, 9 years, the health impacts of people that kind of rushed ahead, just saying, I just want to be on my property and understanding, the challenges and trauma that comes with that, but really the importance of getting these situations remediated. So are you getting support from government agencies or local companies, or are you doing some sort of fundraising, or do you have a non?
So here's the crux. Here's the crux. And it's a big crux. There's three messages that I want to put out there to people if they're watching this. One is thresholds, the other is expedited permitting, and the third, oh gosh, what was it? Um, there was a third. Oh gosh, it just escaped me.
This
So
is about them moving back on the property.
yeah, and safety, okay, and exposure. So three things: exposure, thresholds, and expedited permitting. Because I just heard on the news that Trump is taking all the credit, for saying you can self-approve your permitting process. And it's like, I would caution people to do that. Take advantage of it only after you've treated your soils, because any ground that's not treated, that's not covered, is a potential exposure and liability to anybody who comes on that site to work, because they're kicking up the ground, they're disturbing the soil, the particulates and the contaminants that are bound to those inert materials may or may not be free particulates, but they may be attached to a carbon molecule or a metal inert molecule and go airborne and then land on your being, right? And on your skin, in your mouth, in your you name it, right? To cover it will reduce your exposure risk. And people don't know that. They think that just because they scraped the property, you've removed not just mineral content and the contaminant analytes, but also organic material that should have stayed in my opinion, my professional expert opinion, should have stayed on site and treated biologically.
And,
So
especially soil permeation with any rainfall that happened and that leaching in. Some people I know might have
they're
wells on their property.
right. So leaching and surface water runoff needs to be spoken to at this point too. So from an environmental planning perspective, the soil that's in Altadena is highly compacted. I mean, if you just start thinking about how much heavy equipment was on every single property, removing that vegetative debris and structural debris. They compacted the ground. We're going down maybe a half an inch, maybe 10 centimeters to collect samples. So there's no infiltration whatsoever happening.
Right.
It's running off. So the impact is surface water quality. So if there are still contaminants above ground on the surface and the rains come, or there's a pipe burst, a water pipe that bursts and it's just spewing water, you're taking with it, just like you do on surface roads, all the oils, all the hydrocarbons, and now the heavy metals. are going to be going down, and they could be permeating into areas that do have living cover and have a better soil horizon to be able to receive it. That's good. But we have strewn about so many of these compost and straw bale socks that are now haphazardly just kind of willy-nilly everywhere, that once controlled the flow of stormwater, and in some cases, if it was filled with compost, was collecting metals, but there's no recovery or management of those straw bottles.
Well, I know that's been a huge issue too in some of the interviews I did in the Palisades, especially along Malibu, and the horrific impact, not just to marine life in Santa Monica Bay,
Yeah,
but I've attended several meetings with the Santa Monica City Council where at any one of these city council meetings, you had 60, 70, 80 people in there saying, the economic development, the impact of people not wanting to come there for tourism and the
right.
impact on shops and businesses,
Sure,
but also
sure.
an impact of, one of the meetings we had 50 youth in there that were all surfers and representatives of Surfrider talking about, listen, the kids are going in the ocean and they're getting sick right now
Yeah,
because of the unmitigated, uncontrolled,
right,
flow of water. And again,
right,
as you know, in
right.
permaculture, hay bales and wattles, and there's different ways to remove contaminants. But I will say, again, sometimes civic leadership. I'm very much a bridge builder. I don't want to, beat anyone up for it, but they don't always have all the solutions, and they really
Yeah.
need NGOs and companies
Well,
and businesses like yourself to step up with the
yeah,
solutions and partner because
yeah,
it just adds to the catastrophe of the whole
yeah.
situation.
And if I can add to that, the boots on the ground, um, first response, has been a legacy practice, legacy best management practices. It's what they know they've used in the past. It's what they're in reacting mode and putting into place, pulling the trigger on current best management practices without being nimble, flexible, open to change in the moment when the need is the greatest. And so, where you have the organizations like EFRU and EFC and Post Fire stepping in, they are professionals in and of themselves, right? That are local residents in the area. They are the ones that need to be consulted, right? And ask what's needed. What do you see that's needed versus a cookie cutter plan that doesn't fit the need or the response that's required. And as a small business, and I'm going to put this out there very transparently, we are a small business. We're not a corporate, large scale, tree trimming company that the Army Corps would hire subcontract, or an environmental engineering firm that I've had the privilege and luxury of working for. So I know that space. But as small businesses, banding together because we are immediately responding to the need, it's our voices that I think need to be heard and pivoting to, because we're getting the work done and we're responding to problems that are being caused by some of these legacy practices that have been put in place. And I'll give you an example. Again, this is not to bash, this is not to, but it is constructive criticism for whoever is listening and is in a position to be able to have a genuine, transparent, and proactive conversation around what needs to change the next go around. And the easiest or the most simple example is how the vegetative debris was managed from day one after the fires left and we were able to get crews in to clear the streets. What ended up happening was they treated it like trash. They picked it up, they cleared the roads for emergency access, and then they hauled it offsite. They hauled it to a central location, which it could have been local, say at the Rose Bowl Stadium, or further still, outside of the zone and processed everything off-site. Now, our treatments require that very material to be kept on site where it came from, right? They remove trees that should have been chipped down, grinded down on site from where it came to then cover immediately the ground so that it could be it would be ready for the rainfall to capture it and sequester the moisture within that litter layer of we call it a biofilter for composting, but it's the
Yeah.
same kind of practice, right? And we
And
just followed the same protocol of remove, haul, process off-site, and then imagine the costs involved with how much equipment, emissions, labor to do this off-site. And then here we are scrambling to actually get this material back to people's properties.
they did the same thing in the Paradise Fire, but not only that, they actually came on with timber management companies and cut thousands of healthy trees that were completely unaffected by the fire, and basically just scraped the
Right,
sites completely raw, scraped the
right,
topsoil, cut every single tree. You
right,
know, some of the wood, which could have been used for other remediation techniques, like you said, mulching and biochar, but they just scraped
right,
it and took it off site. So
right.
again, this is
And
such a huge
that
important.
need not be. That really was the reverse of what was needed. And it cost the taxpayer a lot of money. And it was not put to highest and best use. So people suffered more financially. Um, and yeah, but that's the challenge we're facing right now, because we're small, but we're mighty, right? We know the area, we're from the area, we have a system, and still there's efforts to try to reinvent the wheel.
Well, what I like to say is, regeneration is based on the spirit and the technique and of innovation, and also looking at things, whether we call them watersheds or bioregionalism, but each area has its own unique problems and issues and dynamics to it, and we can't just, put a band-aid on cancer, and there's
Mhm.
not one fix all for every type of situation. So again, the fact that you're, a residence there, you have history, you went through this incredible process of learning your skill set, working with legacy organizations like the Rose Bowl, and then the unfortunate situation of this fire, which, as painful as it is
Yeah.
also, and this is why I'm intent on, even though I don't live there, helping to cover this, because this is an actual living, innovative demonstration model of how we need to look at regenerative practices and deal with these types of natural disasters in the future. And also, I'm working with people in Lahaina. After the fire there, I worked with a huge agricultural company. We were able to bring in about 1,000 gallons of compost tea
Nice,
and
nice.
treated a
Yeah.
lot of the soil there, and also the historic banyan tree. So again, this is,
Yeah.
this isn't a short game. This is long term of educating ourselves, educating people, looking at the science, and finding these methods to help, protect people's health and to have less detrimental and impact on the planet. So with the minute or two that we have left, and of course, we want to invite people to the Soil Summit, February 21st and 22nd. The 21st will be on location in Altadena, and Christine and others will be there. We'll have speakers and some panels and hands-on demonstrations of her compost towers and the amazing work that she's doing. And then on Sunday, we will be virtual and online. And I do want to say we are going to be inviting people. We will have masks available, but we want to encourage people to please bring some sort of a breathing protective mask up at the site, even though Christine's been up there working, but we want to make sure people are safe. So again, I'm so honored to have this time with you, and it just really galvanizes and crystallizes a lot of the stuff that I've seen and practice and my own research, and of course, bringing your scientific expertise and history. This is such an important topic at such a pivotal moment. So again, with the last few minutes that we have left, what would you like to share with folks that are watching the broadcast?
Yeah, well, you can check us out, and our work at 301organics.com. I hope you can see the screen. This is
Yeah,
our main website. If you want to download the results that I just shared, that's right here on that button. And then the report immediate access, if you don't want to sift through the county's dashboard, that's there. If you are a fire survivor and would like to engage with us and ask questions and or interested in soil treatments, you can go to altadenasown.com website, and it has links in there for how to sign up, and then kind of a photograph of the workforce that we're building and training. They've been with us for now over 6 months, so they know how to monitor, they know how to build, they know, and this is the county. They were coming out visiting some sites, public health department during the summertime, but I would just invite you to check out some of these photographs of the work that we're doing. We have our own health and safety plan in place, our own operations plan. We're very into keeping our workers safe. So, and we just everything about soils. So thank you, Michael, for this opportunity to engage with you and have this conversation.
absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, Christine. And again, if people are just coming in the midway through the video, again, you can go back to the beginning. We've been talking with Christine Lenches-Hinkle from 301 Organics, an amazing solutionary here on our show Solutionaries, and also part of our mounting micro documentary called Build Back Green LA. Because this, as horrific as it's been, and I don't want to underemphasize the human impact that this has had on people's lives. I mean, that's the human story is really sad and tragic and what people are dealing with. But turning lemons into lemonade and making this a learning moment of how we could do things differently. And I will say, with the Build Back Green LA, this little micro documentary we're doing, we're also looking at, and I'd like to talk to you in the future about, of course, Los Angeles and the state of California has committed something like $5 billion towards helping to green the 2028 Olympics, which is interesting because they're talking about greenways, they're talking about electric monorails. So I hope that you are very much involved in that
I
discussion.
tried. I tried. It didn't go anywhere, sadly.
Well, we're going to stay persistent because, and I will say, during the Olympics, we are actually going to we're doing what's called the regenerative Olympics. We're going to hold a couple-day forum and panels and keynote speakers to talk about how green is the Olympics. And again, not to bash anyone, but to bring more awareness to it, but also to bring some of the voices of people like yourself, the regenerative Olympiads who are doing amazing legacy level work. And that plan is already in motion. We already have venues and we're looking at dates in 2028. So we'll continue to put our superpowers together.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I can't express the appreciation and just the awe of the work that you and your team are doing. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. All right. Take care. All right.
Okay, bye
Bye-bye.
bye.